Welcome to the Northumberland Festival of the Arts. My name is Shane Jones, and in this series, we feature interviews and discussions with individual artists, leaders of arts groups and organizations, civic leaders, and arts lovers in our county. Today, we have the privilege of speaking to Dimitri Papatheodorou. Now, let me introduce you to Dimitri. Dimitri Papatheodorou is a visual artist, musician, and architect. Periphery, his home, is 6 acres and structures of a work in progress, a settler's landscape with an emerging hybrid identity. I think that's a modest introduction. Dimitri's artistic endeavors also extend to writing, and visual artist, in his case, needs to be broken down into painter and sculptor, of which he is both. Dimitri is also a loyal supporter of the arts in our county by being active on the boards of local arts organizations. So welcome, Dimitri.
Thank you, Shane. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I had some questions for you, Dimitri. I was going through your website and had some very interesting videos and writings on that site. You said that one of your teachers had said to you, "You can't draw space." Was architecture your response to that?
No, that comment was actually a colleague, Professor Colin Ripley, who also is a patron. So he was just talking about the realization that, you know, we can't really draw air, like space. We can only kind of approximate space by drawing in the walls and the apertures and so forth. So it is obviously an architectural idea, and how that applies to visual communication and painting in particular, which is what he was talking about, is really interesting. You know, what kind of, from everything, what kind of paint to use, what kind of brushes to use, what, you know, color. It is visual. I mean, painting is two-dimensional. As much as some artists try to add globs of paint to canvas and make them three-dimensional, ultimately it is an art form that has its limitations in 2 dimensions and in illusory representation. And so, you know, whether a painting is abstract or realistic, that's not the point. It's more to do with the application of paint on a canvas and the reality of that. Everything we do in life is a representation. I'm not fully known to you through the medium of Zoom. I'm only merely a shadow on the screen, and then furthermore, as I am perceived by you in your brain, that's another kind of mediation or representation. So the real world is really made up of images, compressed abstractions of reality. And I think that relates to architecture very much in terms of the thinking about architects tend to draw pictures to depict the future, right? Like we make plans, either 2D or 3D drawings to project an idea of space into the future, a home or a place of work, whatever it is. So we're constantly imagining, drawing space with severe limitations. I hope that answers your question a little bit.
That's a very interesting way of looking at painting and architecture. So thank you for that. I'm going to switch to another topic, which is near and dear to me, and that's about finding home, because I'm an immigrant as well, and in a home, it's been always a preoccupation for me. Now, you were born in Canada of Greek immigrants, and finding home is in your work. Is Periphery, which is located outside Warkworth, your new home, an attempt to capture this lost or missing home?
Yes, it is. I didn't realize it until we actually lived in this landscape. You know, one of the advantages of going from urban to rural is that you have the privilege of experiencing both. We're all on the move. all the time. We all have, I suppose you could say, indigenous roots somewhere in the world. I haven't done a DNA test, but I presume my home, ancestral home, is in Arcadia, which is both a mythical and a real landscape in central Greece. I'd like to think, although I haven't done the DNA test, that's where my indigeneity lies. As most of us, at least the two of us, have been on the move for quite some time, either our parents or foreparents, or even ourselves. Like just moving from Toronto to Warkworth, Northumberland County, a number of years ago, is transformational. It transforms your inside and through the outside, right? We can't separate us people from environment or from society or from it, as much as we try to be islands. So this idea of constantly trying to figure out how we see ourselves within the greater landscape. The idea of home is really a big, important aspect to all of us. It isn't about your investment portfolio or your retirement plans, although it is about that too, but it really is so fundamental to our well-being. Our homes are sacred places. They're the caves that we re-enter. If you think about, Homo sapiens as having once lived in caves, this sort of collective memory of home is also really, really a big deal. So the periphery, the name periphery came about as a way to just sort of label a state of being or a way of thinking or a way of being, and defining my new home in the countryside as a place that's in flux. Obviously, it once was a First Nations place. It then became a settler place, and now it's a place of immigrants, if you will, those of us who've been displaced due to economic forces or war. In my case, it's both, because, Second World War, parents came over, etc. So I also think that the periphery is where things happen, not in the center. The center is already established. We all know it. We can all find it easily. It's the periphery, the outskirts, the margins, where innovation comes out of and change happens. So that idea struck me. It was very appealing. And so I called the historic name of our home. It's actually Scottish homestead of 1861. It's called Wheatland Farms. And that name still appears, and it's still there. And there's an etching in our living room with the Giroux family homestead drawn, because it is kind of it's a stone house with some architectural heritage interests. So that still exists. I'm not changing history at all. I'm just passing through it, and as we all are.
Good. I'm glad with that definition, because I've had one too. I've always said that home, because I've had many homes. Home is a state of mind and not a place, because we take all these homes that we've been in and they kind of coalesce into images in our mind, and it becomes our place, our safe place, when everything around you is kind of falling apart. So let me move on to another item I picked up in your website. You also say that images are more real to you than places. How has that helped or hindered you as an artist?
Oh, it's hindered me a great deal. And it's really just I just turned 57, so these things are really long, percolating for a long time. But I'm also I self-identify as queer, as a gay man. So in living in that space before coming out, which was a bit late, in the 90s when I came out, there's a lot of fantasy, imagination, a disconnect between place or reality, the world, the homophobic world that once was, that still is, I suppose, and images of the world that we create in our minds. So I think a lot of gay people or queer people live in transition all the time. And we live, I wonder, they often talk about gay people being very creative or whatever, but I think if we are, and if that is our identity, it comes from a place of struggle and of oppression, if you will, overcoming oppression. And the idea of images or the idea of having ideas for a better world or for a different world, or in some cases, it can be self-destructive because you might try to imagine yourself as someone you are not, which is often the case, often with queer people coming to terms. So yeah, the notions of interiority versus exteriority, imagination, images, fantasies are more real, have been more real than reality. And that's my legacy, because I really felt it. And now I'm, in the last few years since moving out to the country, I'm connecting with the world a bit more. I'm volunteering, I'm participating in arts, culture, doing things like this. That's a big deal for someone who is afraid of his own shadow for many years.
That's a good way of explaining that. Afraid of his shadow for many years. It must have been a tough time. Let me get to a point about story, because that's another thing I like to do. I like to write books. And you said in your website, you said, I didn't have a story to tell for many years. Mm-hmm. Do you have one now?
Oh, yeah. I was thinking about identity. I think about it all the time. And I teach young people, and I often, we digress into other subjects in relation to architecture, which are all related ultimately. But the story, I was thinking, who am I? Am I Canadian? Yes. Am I Greek? Yes. Am I gay? Yes. But which nation is the most important, or which identity is more fundamental than the others? And I at the moment, I think the queer identity is a group or a culture that I feel most at home with. That doesn't mean I don't like straight people, or that I don't hang out with them, or have family members who are straight. But I think my narrative, I'm reading a lot of Walt Whitman lately, and I'm doing a song cycle based on Walt Whitman poetry, and identify him as I see him as an ancestor, right? I see him as part of my home. The whole history of art and culture, we have what we have left to us from previous eras. And his poetry is just amazing, because he was, in the middle of the 19th century and before the middle of the 19th century, he was anti-slavery. He was, he wrote not homoerotic, but homocentric poetry, often blurring the distinction between binary lives, right? Straight, gay. It's really, and I really feel that narrative, the narrative of what wasn't queer culture in the 19th century, it wasn't even gay culture. I suppose he may have used the word homosexual. I don't know. I don't really see it in his poetry at all. So that is the narrative, the continuity, historical continuity that I am reaching back towards now. Of course, there are elements of queerness as we define it now, but historically as well, ancient cultures, and it's certainly a culture that I'm wanting to learn more about, which is Indigenous cultures and the two-spirited elements side, I don't even know that much about it, but I want to learn more about it because I think it's vital to my narrative and the narrative of my people, which includes different nations, right? I don't think of, so what country are you from, Shane?
Yeah, I was born in Sri Lanka. I'm also quite mixed up. My ancestry is Dutch, so we were the colonizers
Yeah.
of the East. Then I had some English mixing in there, and Sri Lankan. Then I of course lived in the Middle East, and then came to Canada. So I've been around, and
Yeah.
I am like you. I do identify with an international grouping. I don't really like to narrow myself down to a particular group because then you get typecast.
Yeah.
So and Canada is a fairly multicultural country, right? So it is the right place to be, I think, for me.
It's the best place to experiment or to find yourself.
Yeah. So let me ask you, switching gears a little bit from, your story is fascinating. We probably have to have a longer conversation with you on that. But I want to get to the Northumberland Festival of the Arts, and I'm trying to figure out, is there a role that you and Periphery can play in the Northumberland Festival of the Arts as we get close to the date?
Oh, well, I would embrace it, and I would react to anything you throw at me, Shane, and anyone from your group. I don't yet know as much about it as you do, obviously. So I look forward to maybe having this conversation offline and seeing how I might be able to contribute, and in some way. And maybe it is because we're in Warkworth, right? So the Periphery, my studio and gallery, which is a private gallery, but it's not a commercial gallery. It is like a space that I open up to share ideas. And COVID has been difficult, but hopefully next year it'll be open all through, starting in March, right through to Thanksgiving, and hopefully we'll be able to have people come and visit and see. So the 2020 this year was an exhibit, just one exhibit, and that was my dear friend Dorothy Caldwell and her textile work. So we had a number of small scale COVID allowable gatherings, and very intimate. It's a very intimate experience. That's the other thing about Northumberland County. It's not Prince Edward County. There aren't any huge tour buses or people descending. It's all about very intimate, not exclusive as in like expensive, but intimate, smaller scale experiences. And I think that's actually part of the tourism plan as well in Northumberland, that, in terms of economic development. So the arts are part of economic development. I mean, you cannot separate. I know that artists often feel we're not appreciated, and that we pollinate and we rehab places, and then it becomes too expensive, and then developers come in and we have to move out, and that's a real problem. But truthfully, that's actually like kind of a positive legacy. If we, the artists, make places better, what's wrong with that as a legacy? And I if I can help in any way with this event, of course, that it's totally part of my agenda as well.
Well, we'll keep that in mind, because the festival runs from September the 16th to October the 2nd. So if there's an opportunity to bring or have an event at at Periphery, and I've been to Periphery and I really love that property. It's like a maze of art. Everywhere you walk around, you stumble on something.
Stumbling can be a problem sometimes.
Yeah, no, but it was great. I mean, I enjoyed myself when I came out there.
Especially if there are drinks involved.
And I didn't want to fall into the pool. So
I mean, I have to do some sort of artwork in the waters so people won't fall into the pool. They'll think of it as, floating artwork or something.
Well, thank you very much, Dimitri, for talking to me. This has been a great session. I certainly would look forward to visiting Periphery again sometime, and certainly having you guys on somewhere in the festival in some shape or form. I thank you very much for and thank you viewers for watching us. And we'll have more of these interviews with our artists and art lovers in the county. Thank you very much.
And my pleasure. Thank you so much. And we'll see you very soon.
A spell of fine soft weather, I wonder about a good deal. Sometimes at night under the moon. Tonight I took a long look at the president's house. The white portico, the palace like tall round columns, spotless as snow, the walls also.